The Convention of Maryland voted for independence. Word reached Philadelphia that New Jersey had dismissed her old delegates and was sending new ones, who were instructed to vote for independence. July 1. Congress entered what John Adams called the greatest debate of all. Dickinson of Pennsylvania spoke eloquently and at length against independence. When he had finished, there was a long and thoughtful silence. Adams kept hoping that someone less obnoxious than himself, who was believed to be the author of all the mischief, would rise to answer, but none did, and so reluctantly Adams rose. And he spoke with such quiet power and conviction that not a man present remained unmoved, especially as he reached his conclusion. Before God, I believe the hour has come. My judgment approves this measure, and my whole heart is in it. All that I have, and all that I am, and all that I hope in this life, I am now ready here to stake upon it, and I leave off as I began, that live or die, survive or perish, I am for the Declaration. It is my living sentiment, and by the blessing of God it shall be my dying sentiment. Independence now, and independence forever. No one spoke. Just then the door swung open, and in strode a mud-spattered figure with two others behind him. It was Dr. John Witherspoon, at the head of the New Jersey delegation. Apologizing for being late, he said that although he had not heard the debate, he had not lacked sources of information on the various issues. Gentlemen, New Jersey is ready to vote for independence. In our judgment, the country is not only ripe for independence, but we are in danger of becoming rotten for the want of it, if we delay any longer. The Congress proceeded to vote, and 9 of the 13 colonies voted with New Jersey that day. Pennsylvania and South Carolina voted no, and New York abstained. Delaware was split, 1 delegate to 1. Since Congress was, in effect, only acting as a committee on behalf of the whole country, any decision on the Declaration would have to be unanimous. It was decided that debate would resume the next morning, to be followed by another vote. In the meantime, to resolve the Delaware deadlock, which could well decide the outcome, an express was dispatched to Dover, the capital of Delaware, to fetch their 3rd delegate, Caesar Rodney. A patriot of deep conviction, Rodney had been summoned home on urgent business. But now the express rider arrived at his farm at 2 a.m, bearing word that debate would resume in less than 7 hours, after which the final vote would be taken. Taking his best horse, Rodney galloped off into the pitch-black, stormy night. It was 89 miles to Philadelphia, over stretches of road which were difficult under the best of conditions, and this night the conditions could not have been worse. Streams, which were normally fordable with ease, had become swollen torrents, and the rain had turned one portion of the road into a quagmire so deep that Rodney had to dismount and lead his horse through it to avoid its being crippled. Unable to obtain a fresh change of horses until dawn, Rodney nevertheless arrived at the State House by 1 p.m., just as the final vote was being taken. Half carried into the assembly room, he was barely able to speak. As I believe the voice of my constituents and of all sensible and honest men is in favor of independence, my own judgment concurs with them. I vote for independence. The Delaware deadlock was broken, and the other delegations voted the same way, save New York, which abstained. The decision was 12-0. The colonies had just become the United States of America. In the silence that followed the announcement of the vote, the late afternoon sun cast its soft rays through the tall windows, on a brass candlestick standing on a green felt table covering, a carved eagle over the door, a pair of spectacles lying on a polished desk. The magnitude of what they had done began to weigh upon them, and they realized that they and their countrymen were no longer Englishmen, but citizens of a fledgling nation barely a few minutes old. Many stared out the window. Some wept openly. Some, like Witherspoon, bowed their heads and closed their eyes in prayer. John Hancock broke the silence. "Gentlemen, the price on my head has just been doubled." A wry chuckle followed, and then Samuel Adams rose. "We have this day restored the sovereign, to whom alone men ought to be obedient. He reigns in heaven, and from the rising to the setting sun, may his kingdom come." 17. The Crucible of Freedom. As the news of the Declaration spread abroad in the newborn nation, Americans everywhere were delirious with joy, cheering, waving, ringing church bells, wasting gunpowder. Samuel Adams wrote, "The people, I am told, recognize the resolution as though it were a decree promulgated from heaven." And John Adams was so elated, he wrote Abigail twice on the same day. In the first letter, he took a sobering look at the reality of what lay immediately ahead. "It is the will of heaven that the two countries should be sundered forever. It may be the will of heaven that America shall suffer calamities still more wasting and distresses yet more dreadful. If this is to be the case, it will have this good effect at least. It will inspire us with many virtues which we have not, and correct many errors, follies, and vices, which threaten to disturb, dishonor, and destroy us. The furnace of affliction produces refinements in states as well as individuals. In his second letter, however, he looked prophetically into the future of the nation, saying that the day on which the Declaration was passed will be the most memorable in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as the Day of Deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations, from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore. You will think me transported with enthusiasm, but I am not. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure that it will cost to maintain this declaration, and support and defend these states. Yet through all the gloom I can see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is worth more than all the means. America's euphoria died away quickly enough. On the same day that the Declaration was passed in Philadelphia, General Howe landed on Staten Island with the first of what would ultimately amount to an invading force of 55,000 men. The American recruiters doubled their efforts, and